And we are live to our first worldwide global burnout awareness week. This is the first live talk in English that we're doing for the event. And the first Global Burnout Awareness Week is taking place until tomorrow, December 4th. Our mission with this event is to increase awareness around burnout, help eliminate the stigma surrounding the syndrome, and promote a public understanding of its causes, consequences, and treatments. This week is being filled with live panels promoting dialogues between experts and personal stories on the subject, which will be broadcast here on YouTube. And they will be saved in a playlist so you can watch it later if you don't have time or anything happens in the meantime. Guests from 5 countries are present, including Brazil, Netherlands, South Africa, and the USA. The event is free of charge, non-profit, and open to the participations of volunteers who want to share their experience in some way. Help us spread the word by posting anywhere you use your socials with the hashtag Burnout Awareness Week, and learn more at burnoutawarenessweek.org. I am Carol Mutter-Steiner, a Brazilian writer based in the Netherlands. I went through two episodes of the burnout, and now I write and speak about my history with the syndrome and what it has taught me about myself, about work, and about the world. And I'm here today with my dear friend, Kathy Mann, who we met because of the burnout. She is the author of Avoiding Burnout and Harnessing Stress. Beyond her burnout, she appreciates all the beautiful ways that stress helps her, and she guides others towards working with their psychology and physiology instead of against it. She lives in Johannesburg, South Africa, with her husband and 2 young daughters. So very welcome, Kathy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Carol. It's always fun to talk about my favorite topic with one of my favorite people.
So Kathy has been one of the first people I have been in touch with since I started working and writing about my story with burnout. We connected, I think, via LinkedIn.
I think so. Yeah.
Over 2 years ago already. And this is the second interview. This is the second time that I'm interviewing you.
Yes.
The first time was 2018, was about 2 years ago, for the Better Achiever Sessions, which is a podcast that I had in English when I started talking about it. And tomorrow we're going to have Jerry Palayo, who has a PhD on workplace burnout, which was the first person I interviewed. And later today we have Charlene Rimsha, which is a psychotherapist and a body therapist. And she is also one of the first people I have interviewed. So it's also a very good feeling for me of coming full circle, and also bringing back the people who have embraced me in this community, that it kind of became a community. And I'm trying to, in a way, make it global, because I was in the Netherlands, and you're South Africa, and there's somewhere in Turkey, and then there's a lot of people in Brazil who talk about it. And so it's really amazing to be here with you today, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks. You too. I think it's important to be in this community of like-minded people, because there is so much judgment around burnout, and there's a lack of understanding generally. So it's a great feeling to connect with people who really have been through it themselves and understand the true meaning and consequences of burnout.
Yeah. So first things first, for whoever haven't read your book yet, which I suggest, or listening to your previous interview, can you share us a little bit about your story with burnout?
Okay, sure. So I was working in a family business at that point. It was about the end of 2014. And after about 5 years in the business, I really, my health collapsed, and I was very confused at the time as to what was happening. I was approaching 40, and I thought I was having a midlife crisis or something. I didn't quite know what this was, but I knew that something wasn't right. And what I felt then, my experience of the symptoms was really around fatigue and headaches as my first markers. But I think through all the experiences I've had in my life, I'd become a bit out of touch with what my body was telling me, disconnected from what my physiology was saying. So it was quite difficult to figure out, what was really going on. And then I started to get medical advice. And for me, the burnout, burnout is unique for everybody.
Mhm.
How I experienced it was I developed an autoimmune disease. So that's a thyroid disease. And that I will have for the rest of my life. And I experienced chronic fatigue for about 3 years. And that did significant harm to my health and my life, as I'm sure you can imagine, because I
Yeah.
couldn't really even shower without having to recover. It was that severe. So that was my sort of physiological experience. And, I think that burnout is always accompanied by those earmark symptoms of cynicism and the irritability, depression. All of those little things are always there underneath. And
Yeah.
of course, I experienced all of those as well. So that was it for me.
Yeah. And before that, you were quite the overachiever.
Yes, I was an
You were, how do you say that? Ultra marathonist,
ultra
which I
marathon.
didn't even know what it was.
Yes. So yeah, an ultra marathon will be something longer than a marathon. So a marathon will be 42 kilometers or 26 miles. And an ultra would be maybe 50 kilometers. And there's one in South Africa that's a 90-kilometer event. So I did one of those in my life in one day, which is crazy. And it takes the entire day. So and looking back, it was ridiculous what I was doing. The training for that alone, the physical stress on me was so heavy. And the emotional and mental stress of running a business in a toxic environment, the stress of having young children at the same time, people pleasing, all of those things just contributed all to the burnout. Those were some of the big sources, I think, which led me there.
Yeah, and in one of the panels yesterday, one of the people who were watching mentioned that she has a friend that has kids, and she does this and this and this and that, and she feels very bad about herself because she cannot do as much as her friends. And we talked about comparing, and also I said, yeah, but that doesn't mean that she will necessarily be able to do that forever.
Yes,
And how
yes.
is that experience?
Yeah, I feel exactly that. And people used to tell me, I was the managing director of a business. I was running ultra marathons. I had these little kids. And people actually said to me, you're just like Superwoman. How do you do it? And I thought, I'm so special. I'm so capable, but obviously that was not sustainable. And it's funny when I look back now, I thought, I was quite arrogant. I thought I was like somehow slightly better than everybody else. And I was completely wrong, because that was not a sustainable model. And exactly what you say, that will end at some point.
Yeah.
Sadly, you cannot push to that extent for long periods of time. It just can't be done.
Yeah. So the second book that you wrote, the Harnessing Stress, you bring a very interesting approach to stress. That is that it is not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that when we start talking about burnout, when we suffer a burnout, we become traumatized by stress.
Yes.
We are traumatized of feeling any stress. We are traumatized of doing anything that will make us any tired at all. And then you bring this concept, which is scientifically proven over and over, that it depends on the outlook that we have on stress. It depends on how we manage it. So talk us a little bit through what is your perspective on stress now, what it really means, and how can we actually harness it?
Yeah, okay, great. So I think what happened to me is something that the researchers call post-traumatic growth. So often when people go through a big trauma, it could be the onset of an illness, it could be a burnout, it could be an assault, an accident, a loss of a loved one. And when people go through something very stressful like that, their whole mindset and appreciation for life changes. So there's a few key characteristics. And what people do is they change their faith, their belief in whatever greater powers. They develop a much stronger belief of what they're capable of. And they also have much more intense compassion for other people and their own suffering. So I think this burnout experience changed my views on life so much that I then became a stronger person at the end of it. And of course, as you say, it does depend on our outlook. So you can choose to focus on the negatives and how it destroyed your life, or you can choose to focus on what it gave you. And it gave me quite a gift to reevaluate what was wrong in my life and to then rebuild it based on better principles. So that's the gift I see in the burnout for me. So now I see stress generally as a mechanism for growth and something that can help us. And what I found beautiful is that there's so much research that shows us how stress can really benefit. There's a lot of different stress responses. There's not just that fight or flight one that we know about. There's a whole number of them. And that will depend on what our autonomic nervous system has been used to, all the experiences we've had in our past, and the situation itself. So if you see someone suffering or being hurt, you feel this great compassion, and that's kind of a stress response, and different hormones are released than if your manager was shouting at you, for example. Then that's a different situation and your body reacts differently. So knowing how the body's reacting in all these different ways, we can start to appreciate, to say, oh, I've got a live interview with Carol. I'm kind of nervous, but it's good because I'll be focused and I'll have high concentration, and my adrenaline and cortisol will drive me to achieve at my absolute best. Or, you can say, oh, the nerves, I'm not going to cope. So the way you rationalize it and your mindset around it is quite significant. And that's what I try to do in a lot of my work. I educate people as to what these different stress responses look like and feel like, and how we can move to a place of appreciation instead of that fear and overwhelm.
Awesome. Can you share with us the story of where you're sitting as as an actual example of stress management?
Yes. So for those watching, I told Carol just before we started, I don't usually have this backdrop because I'm actually in my neighbor's house. And the reason for that is because our street, one of our neighbors has a fault in their property, and the council has turned off both the water and the power. So at home, I have no Wi-Fi and no power for my laptop. So of course, our neighborhood being as friendly as they are, my neighbor said, come on over and you can use our Wi-Fi and sit in my lounge. And here I am in a different property. And, on top of all the preparation, and I have another speech a little bit later, so I'm feeling quite stretched today. But my thinking was very much like, well, I need to walk the talk. I'm feeling stressed because not only do I have a live interview that people from around the world are watching, I have a speech later, and I have this now crisis in my home environment. But I could have chosen to be overwhelmed, but I shifted my thinking to say, well, do I have some of these resources that I can leverage to move myself to a better situation? Oh, I can lean on my neighbor. I can bring my power pack for my phone. I can find different ways of accommodating the situation. So it was at least evidence that I've learned something along the way from stress.
That's really awesome. That and also I mentioned to you that this whole week is also being a very interesting showcase for me, because one thing, and when you burn out, you have this fear of I will not ever be able to work again. I don't like working again. I remember that I went to a coach right before I collapsed in the second episode. I went to a coach here in the Netherlands, and she gave me a questionnaire of what would I do. And one of the questions was, what would you do if you had €1,000,000 and you didn't need money at all? And I wrote, I would watch Netflix. What else would I do? I would lie on the couch, eat, sleep, and watch Netflix. What's more? And because that's what I needed in the moment.
At that time,
exactly. And then we start feeling guilty that, oh, I cannot do this and that. But it's a matter of time of you being able to recover and understand that, burning out and collapsing, there's a path to that. And we will not necessarily get there if we're able to check in with ourselves constantly.
Yes, I think that's really important to also allow yourself, give yourself permission. And that's what's interesting about burnout, is that the type of person who's going to burn out is the type often who is very hard on themselves and doesn't give themselves permission to rest and recover. There are people in my book that I've interviewed people, and they felt that, the one lady said she feels like her husband's watching her every moment. And if she sits on the couch to relax, he's judging her for being lazy. And so that's, it's terrifying to think like that, because we can never have a rest. How do you ever recover your energy if you don't feel that you have permission to rest.
Exactly. And what are one of the learnings, and not one, but like some of the things, because you interviewed a lot of people for your second book.
Yes.
So what are some of the techniques and strategies that people use to live with this stress in their everyday lives?
Okay, so what I have one chapter called Prevention of Stress, which I found was really interesting. And so some people actually preempt the stress. And the one lady was so smart. She leaves, she does absolutely no snoozing. So when that alarm goes off, she is really strict. She just pushes it right away, because snoozing then leads to pressure and traffic and all sorts of trouble. And then she goes and exercises and watches something educational or a TED talk or something at the same time. So she'll be on her treadmill, she's learning and exercising simultaneously. So by the time she gets to work, she's missed the traffic, she's learned something, she's exercised. And then she puts a calendar reminder in and blocks out her calendar, so no one books these late meetings, so that she can beat the traffic home. And that maximizes the time with her children and her family. So some people have these amazing mechanisms, these rules almost of life, as to how to make sure when her day goes like that, then it's smooth and it's great. If something happens and then she ends up leaving 20 minutes later, the whole day feels quite disrupted, and she's in a bad mood, and then she's late to come home, and it just sort of spirals. So that was really beautiful. I thought that was such a clever example of how to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought some other people, stress comes from a lot of feeling strained between the balance of motherhood and trying to do a good job at work. So some of the people I really admired were those who delegate a lot of the childcare. So they have somebody who fetches their children and does a bit of homework with them, or they have a granny that takes the children once a week and they have a date with their partner. So those mechanisms are very helpful for restoring our well-being and having these routine lunches with friends to connect. And this is something that's so important this year, when we've been so isolated, to have rituals where we say once a month we're going to have even if it's an online pizza making fun evening together, we do those things to connect with the people we care about. Yeah.
Amazing. You touched upon the topic of having healthy routines, and it's one of the first things that I started reading about when I had my burnout. And it seems to me that sometimes we can get to like the 5 a.m. club, doing
Yes.
the ultra marathon type A people, which is not what we want. But
Yes.
there's also, and last night, I interviewed a psychologist that is doing a global research on parental burnout. And one of the things that she mentioned was exactly that it's very important to have a routine that is not strict and that is not like imposed, or that everything is on the clock, but to have a little bit of predictability on the day, so
Yes.
you can rest and do other things better.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think what's fascinating sometimes with little kids is that they take things very literally. I remember my little daughter, we went to the doctor once, and we've got strict rules around the screen time, because otherwise they spend too much on screens. But when she was sick last year or something, she said to the doctor, "But I'm not allowed." He said, "Go home and watch TV." And he said, "Oh, but I'm not allowed." So I said, no, I think we can make an exception for, for those kind of situations. But it is good to have some boundaries and to be able to be fluid with how you manage your home routine. And I think it's become really important in this era this year, because people's boundaries between work and home have become so blurred, and they've had children really in their work environment at home, and it's so difficult to balance and separate all those things. So I think it's very important to be mindful of when you're working and when you're at leisure, and when your children are allowed to come into your office, and when they really have to stay out.
Yeah. And how did you, because you mentioned that now you're not on the lockdown, but before you were, so how did you handle this, knowing what you already know, because also you are writing your third book,
Yes.
about the pandemic, and also like talking to people about how they're coping with this new way of living, the new normal, which is an expression that I hate, but it's because what's normal anyway. But
Yes.
this new ways of living. So how has been your experience and of the people that you're interviewing for your book?
Yeah, I think it was very challenging for me and for many people to try to balance this work environment. So, for me, I think what's very valuable is that my office, which I call my sanctuary, is outside of the house. And that provides a barrier. So, what I was able to do when the children were completely at home is I gave them activities to work on. They had self paced work and they could do something. And I said to them, for the next hour, I'm not available. But if you have a question, you park that question and then I'll come and support you. And then I had to sort of be running in and out of my office and back inside if there was a crisis. And sometimes, it was a bit of a juggle with the electronic devices, because now we had, 4 people in the environment all using the Wi-Fi simultaneously. And we sometimes, a meeting would go down and my little one, she was only 8, to try to figure out how to get back on the meeting. There was a bit of juggling and panic and rushing around, but I'm quite amazed at how children bounce back and how they learn so incredibly fast, how they just consume the technology and become really proficient. So by the end, the learning and the independence has been pretty remarkable from within my own house.
Yeah.
I think some of the people I interviewed, they found, in my country, the government was very strict on things like alcohol and tobacco restrictions. So there were some people that, weren't really at the point when they wanted to give up smoking. So it was incredibly difficult being locked then in a house with your family. Now you've got multiple people in a room all trying to have meetings at the same time.
Mhm.
And then, you can't smoke and you can't have your beer at night
Oh,
because there's nothing. And that was huge stress for some people to adjust to it. And I think the isolation, particularly for the elderly people, has been very difficult. So there have been the retirement communities have been really strict about who's allowed in. And many retirement communities, the people have to eat on their own in their bedroom. And that loneliness, from the research I did in my second book, the loneliness can have dramatic impacts on our health. So that was some of the difficulties in the influence of the pandemic and the government's response to it in the people that I've interviewed.
yeah. And it's a very interesting point of the loneliness, and the feeling of isolation. What have you found, and what are some of the things that people can do if they are feeling lonely, especially now that in the Netherlands we have a second, in Europe we have a second lockdown, in Brazil it's a lockdown that we don't know if it ended anyway, and we're already going to another one. So how
Yeah.
can we do that? How can we deal with
Yeah,
that?
I think some of the things that's important to know from a research and physiology point of view is that we have this hormone called oxytocin. So when oxytocin is pumping through our bodies, it lowers heart rate and blood pressure, and it counteracts, it lowers cortisol, it boosts serotonin, the happy chemical. So it has quite a positive impact on us. And we get oxytocin by connection. So that's hugging people, talking, having a trusted conversation with someone who really matters to us, from things like physical touch, a massage, from stroking our pets, if you've got a pet, and give them lots of extra love, because that really boosts that oxytocin. It can buffer the effects of stress. So if people are isolated and they are living at home and they can't get the physical touch, you can still get it from meaningful conversation. So I mean, I've had patches where I've got people in my home environment, but I've had patches where I've really felt disconnected from people because I do work alone and my husband's in meetings all day. And, so what I've done is that I've made a conscious effort to connect with people. So to reach out to one of my contacts on LinkedIn or a friend. And here in South Africa, we can go for a coffee now and we can go to restaurants. But if they're far away, I've done a Zoom chat with people, or if they're feeling it's too risky to go out, I've
Mhm.
done a little Zoom call in that. And the other thing I've done as a business owner is that I've on purpose joined a lot of networking communities. So there are many of these coaches that have started up free, just a 1 hour session a week where you can come and share your challenges as an entrepreneur with others and say, oh boy, I'm finding this challenging, and what are people doing on social media, and how are people getting new clients, and just learning from each other and all feeling supported can be quite beneficial. And there are some free networking organizations that do a talk, for example, female entrepreneurs organizations that do very inspiring talks and about people who've done remarkable things during this time. So that just elevates your mood and your levels of inspiration. So I've done that for myself, and that's the kind of thing that I recommend people do, reaching out to loved ones, setting up sessions, even a phone call, because there was something I published on my social media recently that hearing the voice of someone else is much more powerful than a text or an email. So even sending a voice note to a parent or someone you love, that really boosts them if they're feeling isolated. And hearing that voice, if you do a phone call and say, how are you doing? And how is life for you now in this difficult time? And sure, I'm finding it really lonely. What do you think? And that can really boost you and release that oxytocin that really buffers us against the effects of stress in our bodies.
That's really amazing. It's interesting that you mentioned the pets, because it was last night. I have someone watching all the panels here.
Cat, yes, yes.
Mia,
Okay. Hello.
she's listening. She's not exactly watching, but she's listening. She's been here all week. All
He's
week.
going to become a real expert on burnout by the end.
Yes. Yes, my boyfriend already said that I should make an Instagram profile, and the ads, the username should be the burned out cat, because she looks burned out all the time.
Well, she's getting Zoom fatigue, I'm sure.
Yes, she cannot take. I don't know if she can take my voice anymore. I think I'm gonna have to, go for a week or something. But I think the other day, yesterday or something, I was reading, because I had read a little bit about how pets could be a source of therapy for us in a way.
Yes, absolutely.
And I was reading a lot of research on how having a pet is extremely important for people who have mental health conditions, and
Yes.
that they become like the first circle of support,
Yes.
and which is really amazing. It gives them the sense of safety, of predictability that we mentioned about the routines, because you have to feed the cat twice a day, no matter how wrecked you are. You have to do that, and you have to clean the litter box, or you have to take your dog out. So it adds this, and it's not as challenging as having 5-10 people at your place. So it's an easy sort of, it's a doable challenge.
Manageable. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And I read a research on the purr of the cat specifically, that it's in a frequency that is a healing frequency for them. And if we are in touch with it, it's also healing for us, and activates our vagus nerve.
Yes.
And that was so amazing to discover that this can be such a simple tool for us to live a little bit better.
It's very powerful, and there are a lot of research studies showing the impacts on loneliness are far improved. And there was one fascinating study they did in Japan, where they also created like a robotic pet. And people, if they didn't want to have a real life pet, and even people ended up talking to it, a lot of elderly people, and that just to keep them company. Periodically it was like a Tamagotchi or one of those little things that it speaks occasionally, and you have to touch it to keep it going and things. And there were positive impacts on people's mood and physiology and loneliness just from engaging with something other than themselves. So that can be intensely powerful. And I have noticed, I've got 2 cats, and one of them is a very gray, one's called Smokey. And my oldest daughter really didn't do that well from a mental health point of view during this lockdown period in the isolation. It wasn't good for her at all. And her and Smokey were literally locked in her room for days on end. And I think it was very helpful because she had the company, and she even showed the teacher. She moved the camera and said, well, look, Smokey, He's joining in this meeting. So it was really quite important. And as you say, that responsibility to feed them and care for them, and just have that extra responsibility gives them something to lean on, and the purring and the company. I think it can be of great benefit to people.
Amazing. I'm checking that we have people commenting and asking. Sibeli, welcome. She spoke on the panel Monday. She's a doctor, and she had a burnout. She used to be a pediatrician, and then she had a burnout, and now she's a coach, and she is an advocate of the movement of slow life.
Yeah.
And we had a very interesting talk. And she's asking, how do you feel about the amount of information we have to deal with nowadays? We have Zoom fatigue, but we feel the need to stay connected all the time and know everything that's going on. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it can be completely overwhelming. And that's what I saw in my oldest daughter, because at the school changed the requirements all the time. And when it was all self-paced, she was doing quite well. But as an introvert, then she was required from early morning till late afternoon to sit in Zoom meetings, lesson after lesson after lesson. And that's what triggered this mental health crisis for her, to try to listen to the lessons and do the work at the same time. And it was really overwhelming for her. So it can be tremendously difficult. But one thing I think I've found from the interviews I'm doing for this book on the pandemic is that at the end, I ask people, why do you think this happened? Just out of curiosity. And overwhelmingly, every person I speak to says that the world needed a reset, that we were just running too fast and it was not sustainable. This continuous requirement to be everywhere, to be doing all these things, and to be in every club, and to be the perfect parent, rushing your child from this extramural to the next. And it offered us an opportunity to completely step back and reset and decide what we truly want in our lives. So I think that's what the pandemic has offered people. And I think I've noticed from my own feelings about events, a lot of people are promoting all these events, and I'd love to attend them all, but I've become quite selective about which ones I'm going to go on, because the time in the evenings with my children is really important. Only on certain occasions will I sacrifice my meal time with my family for a Zoom event. It's not going to happen, that easily. Yeah. So I think that's the gift of the pandemic, but I do think we have to be mindful about it. It has to be intentional. We have to realize, do I really want to do this? And I think from the life that I had before, it was quite a blessing when this pandemic hit and then all extramurals were cancelled. It was great, because before on a Monday, I used to pick up my kids and be shouting at them for being late and driving through traffic like a lunatic, getting there late, apologizing to the teacher, then rushing them home, bathing, feeding, cooking. I was grumpy with everyone. And every Monday night, I just thought, oh, this is ridiculous. And then as soon as it happened, and dancing was cancelled, and then I said to my daughter, do you want to go back to dancing? She said, no. I said, me too. And why didn't we think about that before? Here was a fantastic opportunity. We should have just done that. Yeah. But now we've been offered that real, like when all the things opened up again for us here in South Africa, I could then decide, okay, I'm willing to do swimming, and then everything else happens online. They do the singing lessons online, and I will be selective about what kinds of things I attend, because my writing is top priority. I need to make space and time for that, and not fill my calendar with a whole lot of other unnecessary obligations. Yeah. So that's kind of how I see it.
Amazing. Yeah. It's very interesting. I don't know if you shared this feeling, but when the first lockdown started, I have the feeling that the whole world was catching up with something that has happened to me like 3 years ago. Yes. The whole like existential crisis, what is happening, the reset.
Yes.
The burnout is a reset. And then I started seeing everyone like in a global, massive scale, like everyone, like, so you know that, the uncertainty, that's exactly how I felt 3 years ago.
Completely. I felt exactly the same. And it was interesting I think I might have written an article about this, the parallels and the differences between the burnout and the pandemic, because I think the parallels were that, okay, we're at home. We can't do the work we were going to do before. We can't do all the social things we were going to do before. That all happened to me in burnout. I didn't have the energy. I couldn't go out. I couldn't work. I had to give up my sports and give up all the things that were important to me. But the difference was it was happening collectively to everybody and not just to me. And it was very lonely when it was just happening to me. And, the burnout, that's the thing. You can't see it. You don't have spots and things don't happen. Your hair doesn't fall out and people are not saying, oh, wow, what's wrong? Because it looks like you're fine. And many people are made to believe that it's all a mental thing and you're just making it up and being a hypochondriac. So does feel incredibly lonely when you burn out, to have to put your entire life on hold and have people judge you at the same time for it.
Yes.
But it was very interesting that everybody now started to feel how I'd felt back 5 years back.
Yeah. And on one hand, and probably again you felt something similar, I'm so glad I was able to take care of myself, because I'm not going to lose it while everyone else is losing it.
Yes.
I know how this feels, and I'm able to be there for people because I've been there.
I've been down this road before. I've figured out how to do self-care. I know how to manage my mental health. I've already figured out meditation. I can do yoga on my own. I could do all of that stuff, which was very valuable, And we even, at first, the lockdown was so severe that we weren't even allowed to exercise outside our gates. So we had to run laps in our driveway to keep fit and things. So it was very interesting. We had to, and you become quite creative. You really do find ways to do, all sorts of things. But what was interesting is that in the burnout, I felt that I didn't have the energy to do anything, even if, I was able to. And the sad part about the pandemic is you have all the energy, but you just can't go out and can't do the things. So there were a few sort of anomalies there, but it was an interesting parallel nonetheless.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned that's also very interesting is that about your daughter being an introvert and with the whole Zoom thing. One of the things that I've discovered with the burnout is that I have an introvert side as well, and I was mostly an introvert for a few years when I couldn't take other people's energy, and now I'm a little bit. I think I'm half because I also love being around people, and I can gain energy being with people. But I also understand that we live in a world that praises extroverts and forces introverts into going out there. So how is it also like for you, for your kid, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, what's very interesting is that we have my husband's an extrovert, and we have one introvert child and one extroverted child. So it's been a very eye-opening in the burnout as well. I was reading a lot about it and trying to understand myself better so that I can also parent better and help them find themselves and appreciate their aspects of themselves. So there were interesting discussions with my husband sometimes, and that he was unaware of how introverts battle with things. I remember the one situation where he was trying to teach my introverted daughter some sort of a sporting thing in the garden, let's, do some coordination. And he had some music on and there was all sorts of things happening. And I said, what are you doing? What are you thinking? She's trying to concentrate on that thing and you're filling the space with all this crazy extraneous noise, and it didn't even occur to him, because that's what he likes. He likes as many stimulants as possible, lots of fun and noise and everything coming at him at once. So that was really interesting. And then he sort of stepped back and said, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. And me as an introverted mother to my extroverted child, I've also had to adapt to say, this child needs noise and stimulation and fun. So sometimes when we're in the car, we need to have music on because she likes that. She needs that to stimulate her. Otherwise she's bored and then she's talking nonstop and, so it's very, we've become quite mindful about it. And my husband read Susan Cain's book, Quiet, so that he could understand introverts better. And then we can both parent according to what each child needs. So, and I think I wish I'd read that book when I was a child, because growing up, I felt as an introvert that there was something wrong. As you say, the world praises introverts and extroverts and encourages that extroverted behavior. And you're shown to feel as if there's something wrong if you don't want to be out crazy every night with people all the time, and you want to be alone and read a book for, a few hours on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I felt dysfunctional when I was growing up, as if there was something deeply wrong with wanting to be alone. And now I can realize and appreciate that that's just from how I'm born, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I can parent my children to have an awareness. And so also their interaction with each other, I have to remind the one, your sister needs a bit of space. Just step away, because they can fight. They get on each other's nerves because the one needs space and the other needs stimulation. So they clash a lot on that topic. So I have to keep reminding them, she needs space, she needs action. Yeah.
Amazing. We have Ana Luisa, which is a Brazilian psychologist, and she did a doctorate in England, and she's saying it is so amazing how simple things can make a huge difference, especially during hard times. I really think the meme culture in Brazil, the laughs and the fun from it, have this powerful positive effect. That's a very good comment on like laughing and humor. That also does for me.
Yes, and I love that. Like right in the beginning of the pandemic, I found social media was full of all these memes and funny videos and songs, and I had quite a lot of fun laughing at all of the stuff that was coming through. I really enjoyed it. It got quite serious after a while when people were losing their lives and things. But it's funny how people's reactions at first is to make fun and make jokes about it, and I think it's good to bring a little bit of light. I think the more time we spend in fear and dread, it's not very productive. We've got to try to find the joy in things and the fun, even in the darkest things, even like in Burnout, kind of look back and chuckle at myself and how silly I was to try and do all these ridiculous things. You've just got to laugh. That wasn't so smart.
Yeah. I do, like, one of the things that is kind of routine to me is that I do the dishes watching a stand-up comedian.
Oh, great.
And because it seems to me that I have a number of laughs at a day that I need to get out. And if I don't, then the day it's like, was it a good day? So I stalk on the laughter watching the stand-up. And I have one Instagram account just for memes that like different from my main account. I follow all of the memes in every language that exists. And then I go consciously, okay, I need to laugh for 20 minutes. That's laughter therapy. And that's so effective.
Very, very powerful. I actually did that consciously without realizing it, at the time. But when I was burnt out without knowing it in that December of 2014, I spent a lot of time watching funny videos, just comedians. While I was waiting for my diagnosis and the doctor, I did for hours and hours a day. I just watched more and more comedy, just because I was in such a dark place. I just almost knew that I needed that cheering up. But I think as a parent, you have the opportunity with kids to laugh quite a lot. And I think that's a huge blessing. And sometimes we take our parenting so seriously, and sometimes, at home, I'm the one who sort of swears quite blatantly. I used to suppress my feelings so much before burnout, but now I'm like, you know what? If I've got something to say, I'm just going to let rip. I'm going to be honest, and out it comes. And if there's a couple of swear words in there, they're old enough to understand that they are not allowed to say that, but I can.
Yeah.
But the reaction to it, it's really funny, they're quite shocked, when I say these things, and there's a lot of laughter and a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying being able to have that lightness as a parent instead of having everything quite serious and let's toe the line and be the responsible parent. Sometimes we get a lot of fun out of doing some silly things, and for me, behaving badly. Yeah.
So I want to say hi to Anaim, Aline. Thanks for watching. And it's morning in Brazil, and whoever is watching live or watching the recording, this will be available in the playlist as well. And so, what would you say to someone who had just found out that they are going through a burnout?
I would say that the most important thing you can do for yourself is to have your needs met. And that happens on a lot of levels. I think the most critical is the physical level immediately. Make sure you've gone to your doctor and you've got whatever, medication that needs support. You might need to change your diet or do things that really nourish the body and help you through it. And then making sure your needs are met in levels of relationship and your job and that kind of thing. So I think unmet needs are a really, really big part of burnout, and living in that obligation where you're looking after everybody else. And I think that would be the primary piece of advice. Start with physical needs, move on to emotional, relationship, mental needs, stimulation for your job, move through the layers of needs and make sure you express those to others around you so that they can help you. And I think many people who burn out are not that good at receiving help and asking for help. I definitely wasn't, but I'm better now. I can't say that I'm perfect at it, and it is tough sometimes to lean on people and accept help. But here I am in my neighbor's house accepting their gracious offer to use their Wi-Fi and their power. So and people love to help. That's the thing. Don't take that away from others by being stubborn and you think you have to be all independent and run the world entirely by yourself. You can accept help and it makes others feel good. So that's the kind of advice I would give to someone just at that beginning stage.
Great. And what would you say to someone who has a partner, friend, or a member of the family going through it?
Yeah, I think the patience is very important because it's not a quick journey to recovery. It can take many years sometimes to get there. And even though they might look okay, they're not really okay. So being patient and supportive is great. It's not helpful to say, you're lazy and it's all in your head. Please don't do that, because that really, there's already so much self-doubt and there's a bit of cloudy thinking and there's all this, people beating themselves up. What we really need at that time of recovery is support and acceptance and love, as much as possible, of all that good stuff.
Yeah. And finally, this is the last question for today. What do you think the world still did not get about burnout?
I think the world has not gotten that it's not the individual's fault necessarily. And I think Dr. Jerry Paleo will talk about this in her research. It supports this factor that the work environment and a toxic culture and poor leaders are big contributors to burnout. And even Christina Maslach in her work, she's one of the renowned experts from way back decades ago, was very clear on the fact that there's something wrong in the organization when your people are burning out. So that's the judgment that people bring to say you were weak and you didn't manage your health. And sure, we've all got to take responsibility. I know that I made bad decisions and I hold myself accountable for all the things that I did to contribute. But I think there's so much judgment from the outside that people who burn out are somehow deficient or weak or inferior than the other people that are strong, and people think it's never going to happen to me. and I thought it would never happen to me either. I could never predict that. But looking back, it was really going to happen. And the culture that I was in, that work environment when it happened, was tremendously toxic. And I can't believe that I allowed myself to continue working in that environment. But going through that now, I can be so much more discerning about the kind of people I'm willing to work with and for. So there is blessings in it if you're able to find it. But yeah, I'd really love people to start to take away that judgment of the individual as much as possible.
Yes, yes, yes. That's amazing. Ana Luisa is saying that she's been using the memes and humor as a therapeutic strategy in her clinic as a psychology, and the effects are very good.
Very good. Great.
That's really, really good. Thank you for everyone who participated. Kathy, thank you so much for joining and for believing in my crazy ideas.
Thank you for all this awareness and the work that you do to continue, moving forward. I feel it's quite an overwhelming task to take on, shifting people's understanding of how burnout happens and things. So I really take my hat off to you for putting all of this together and allowing this opportunity to educate the world about burnout. So thank you so much for that. And
Oh,
for
thank
everyone
you.
watching. Yeah, it was great.
Yes, thank you. Where can people find your work more easily?
Okay, you can find my website is Kathy Mann, that's with a K, and kathymann.coza, so the COZA for the South African domain. And I do also have a writer's page on Facebook, that's KA Mann Writer. And yeah, that's probably the best place. I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone would like to connect and chat. I love to talk to people about their experiences of stress and burnout. And if anyone wants to be interviewed for future books, I'd always love that.
Amazing. Kathy, thank you so much. Say thanks to your neighbor for lending the place so we could have this. Everyone is very thankful for this community, and it's also a very good example for us
Yes.
on, we can hang on to each other, and it's all good.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been really great chatting to you, Carol. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
At I need to do the math for the for the time zones. 5:30 Amsterdam time. We have Thorsten, which is a German UX designer, who has been for burnout, and we talk about sustainable mental health for creative people. At 7 p.m. Amsterdam time as well, we have Charlene Rimsha, which is a psychotherapist, talking about giving yourself a break. And tomorrow we have Dr. Jerry Polillo talking about workplace burnout, overachievers, people pleasers, and sharing some of her firsthand results of the research she's been doing on women and burnout. So keep watching and share with whoever you know. Kathy, thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Bye, Carol. Bye, everyone.